Lovely to see you here this evening. We're going to be talking in a moment or two about ultimate power. But before we do that, I don't know how many of you on the telly followed any of the Edinburgh Fringe. Any of you see anything from the Edinburgh Fringe? Each year they do a poll and they have the top 10 jokes from the Edinburgh Fringe. Have you come across that? I mean, do you want to know what the top joke from the Edinburgh Fringe was? Here it is. Okay. The top joke, top 10. This was the top joke of the whole Edinburgh Fringe. You know who really gives kids a bad name? Posh and Becks. No, that was the best one. I mean, some of the others I thought were I was raised as an only child, which really annoyed my sister. I saw a documentary on how ships are kept together. Riveting. Last night, me and my girlfriend watched 3 DVDs back to back. Luckily, I was the one facing the telly. There was two Olympic jokes. My mum's so pessimistic that if there was an Olympics for pessimism, she wouldn't fancy her chances. And actually, probably this was I like this one. I took part in the sun tanning Olympics. I just got bronze. Anyway, tonight we're thinking about power. And I'm not sure what you think about power. In the news this week, we've seen all kinds of power at work. We've seen the power of Hurricane Isaac, the winds. We've seen the power of the human spirit as we see, maybe you've watched some of the Paralympics and some of the incredible things that people with disability managed to achieve. We've seen people running for power as Mitt Romney started his campaign. We've seen the power of human technology, the first high HD photographs from the surface of Mars. We've seen the destructive power of the forest fire in Spain. We've seen power at work, and we live in a world where maybe we think about power. And this evening, I just want to give a chance to think about ultimate power. In a world where we see all kinds of power at work, what is the ultimate power? And how can we, maybe even this evening, encounter that ultimate power that actually is the power of God? And I'm going to read a few verses from Romans chapter 1. So if you've got a Bible and you want to turn to Romans chapter 1, you can do that. And I'm going to read a few verses as Paul starts off this book. And again, a book that maybe some of you really enjoy, maybe some of you have tried reading it, and you think, do you know what, it's quite hard to understand what he's talking about and what's going on. And we're going to read just some bits of chapter 1 and think about what is Paul saying about ultimate power. So we're just going to read from verse 16 of chapter 1. I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it's the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. First to the Jews, then for the Gentiles. For in the gospel a righteousness from God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the ungodliness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what has been known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal men and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over to the sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind, to do what they ought not to be done. They become filled with every kind of malice, evil, greed, and depravity. They were full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invented ways of doing evil, and they disobeyed their parents. They're senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. Whew. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. There we go. Does that sound a little bit heavy duty? It seems quite intense. What is Paul saying here? What is he trying to communicate as he starts this book to try and explain to people what it is that God's about in bringing rescue and salvation to the world? And I suppose for me there are issues of power at work here. He's trying to explain how the gospel needs to come into our world, and that originally there was the power of God was made known to everybody who had eyes to see. In fact, it says here that since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. In the beginning, God created a world. He created a world where, how can we understand the spiritual powers? How can we understand spiritual things that we can't see? Well, we can start to understand the things that we can't see by looking at the things that we can see. And he said, since this very fabric of this world has been created, the things that we can see with our eyes give us clues to the spiritual reality of God's power and his nature. I don't know if you think that's true, but this summertime, we recently got a little kind of bongo camper van, and we spent a few days up in the Lake District. And we went to the end of this kind of deserted lane in the Langdale Peaks, and it was just idyllic in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by mountains, and at night time, clear sky, no light pollution, and just to spend just gazing up to the sky. And to see stars, and the more you looked, the more stars appeared. And you think millions upon billions of stars, millions upon billions of light years away. And you think, wow, what a universe we live in. What I could see with my eyes describes something of God's eternal power. We spent a few days down in Cornwall, and as we walked along the Cornish cliffs, and we see the power of the waves crashing against the cliffs, and again the wonder and the beauty, we think, wow, here, this describes something of his, not only God's power, but his nature, the creativity, the wonder, the diversity. And first of all, God made the world, and he said it was good. And the world in which we live is a good place where we have eyes to see. God's power is displayed through what has been made. And he says that when we think about power, actually people are without excuse. If they look at the world, look at creation, look from the smallest microbe or to the subatomic particle to the farthest galaxy, it describes there is a God, a good God, a God of love, a God of power. That's the world that God created. He intended us to encounter him, to know him. But a different power crept in, because there's a different power at work in our world. And that's the power of people who don't want to acknowledge God. It's the power of people who go their own way. It's the power that seems to be, we look at the world and we see there's not at times a good power at work. There's power of corruption and evil. There's powers of oppression, of people trafficking. There's domestic violence. We see there's power in our world, and we think maybe we live in a world, and where is the good God? Where is the good power? Because all we seem to see around about us is power that's being misused. Power that abuses people and countries and nations. And Paul tries to explain, well, in this good world, there is another power of work. There's a power of sin. And that's why these 3 times he says that because people exchange loving God and knowing him for a lie of wanting to live in their own world, God says, well, if that's the way you want it, I'm going to hand you over. I'm going to hand you over to see how you get on living in my world your way. And these three things, he says, that the power of, the first thing he says, he hands them over to sinful desires. He hands them over to sinful desires. They exchange the truth of God for a lie, and they worship and serve created things rather than the Creator. And I suppose the first power we see is the power of worshipping stuff rather than worshipping God. Actually, that is a real power. The power of materialism is a real strong spiritual power. Maybe we just think, well, it's the Western world. We just brought up and where we have lots of stuff, where we expect things, but we don't realize that very quickly we become those that exchange the image of God, the truth about Him, the fact that people are made in His image. We exchange that for the lie that stuff will make us happy. That it's all about me, selfish desires. If only I could have more. If only I could have this toothpaste, or if only I had this clothes to wear, or if only I could drive this car, or if only I had this kind of computer or this phone. And we say that stuff will make you happy. There's sinful desires that are out there. And it's a real power. Because the lie is, you think that in pursuing stuff, you'll find happiness, a good self-esteem. But it's a power that robs you. And as we look at a world where stuff becomes more important than people, there's a power that abuses, misuses, mistreats people. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And here God says that there's a power now at work that's not to do with God and His good power that we see in the created world, but people have got a power of their own sinful desires. He goes on to say that He gave them over to their shameful lusts. The power of sex and the misuse and the misplacement of sex that was there for the marriage relationship to strengthen that place of a committed lifelong relationship. And we live in a world where there is a real there's a real power behind sex, that sex sells things, that people think that a relationship can't be a valid, good relationship unless it's sexual. There's a real drive inside that I need my sexual drives and urges to be fulfilled. And if it hurts other people, well, so what? Because it's about me. It's about friends with benefits. It's about how can I have sex without any long-term commitment. And God says that there's a real power that's at work in our world. And maybe many of you have seen that. Maybe for some of you here this evening, you know there's a real power. The power of shameful lust is something that has a grip on your life. And this evening when we come to pray in a moment, we're going to pray that the power of God will break all false powers. Will break the power that is maybe you're feeling in your life. Because there's an ultimate power. There's a greater power. The third thing he says, there's a power of a depraved mind. A depraved mind. And you know, there's something about, I don't know if you see things happen in this world and you think, what's going on in that person's mind? You look at what's happening in Syria and you think, for the president, what's going on in his mind? What's going on in his mind that he thinks kind of butchering kind of hundreds upon hundreds of his own citizens is a good idea? The massacre in Norway and the trial that's been there, and again, what was going on in his mind? We see some of these atrocities and we think that they were human beings, and what was going on in their mind that they thought that was an appropriate way to act? That was a kind of the outcome that they could achieve by that. And it's not just megalomaniacs. For all of us, we make choices. A friend of mine, a vicar, lovely wife, 2 lovely children, and he has an affair and goes off with another woman and abandons his family. And I think, what was going on in his mind? Well, what was going on in his mind? He thought, I had to be true to myself, and I used to love my wife, but I don't, and I've got to be genuine and honest. And you think, actually, that's a depraved mind. And maybe there's some of you here this evening, and you think, actually, maybe depraved's a bit stronger word to use. But your mind isn't godly, it isn't right, it isn't, I don't know. We live in a world where intellect is held above faith, where technology is held above spirituality where we think that the clever people have got what is ultimately true. And we don't realize that unless a mind is heading towards God, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all understanding, of real wisdom. And here he says, look, there's a power at work in our world. There's a power at work that is destroying a world that was created by a good God to do good for people. And what's happening is there's a power that people are self-motivated, selfish desires. People have got motivated by their sexual desires and lusts and what they can get out of another person. They're motivated by thinking that they think all kinds of things, and what that thinking, that thought track, leads to wickedness, evil, greed, depravity, envy, murder, strife, malice, gossiping, slandering, insolent, arrogant, inventing ways of doing evil, disobedient to their parents. I hope my children are listening. I mean, all those kind of horrible things that are there. And they're a consequence of wrong thinking, of thinking that there's a power of our minds, there's a power of thought that needs to be broken. And maybe some of you here this evening, and you know the power of your thought, you know the power of your mind, you know the way you can do mental gymnastics to try and justify your reactions and your choices. But you know it's not a mind that's submitted to God. But somehow it's got a real power, the power of thought, the power of those records that play time and time again through your upbringing, through tragedy, through abuse. There's things that, again, your mind is thinking on a certain track, a certain way, and it's not a right way. And this evening, there's an ultimate power. There's a power of God that can break you free from a mind that is on the wrong track. So here, what Paul's in this passage is very complex. What he's trying to say is that the world is in a mess. A good God created a good world for us to encounter him, that we should look at the physical world and know that he's a God of power, of love, of creativity, of diversity, loves the uniqueness of who you are. And yet, another power has crept in. I mean, just three things about the power of God, because there is an ultimate power. There's a power that's stronger than any power of evil. There's a power that's stronger than anything people have done to you in the past. There's a power that's stronger than any addiction or any force of habit that you're facing at the moment. And it is the power of God. And here's what Paul's saying. He says here, do you know what? I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it's the power of God for salvation for everyone who believes. And that's the news this evening. The news for us this evening is there's a power of God that's available. There's a power of God that's going to save us, that's going to rescue us. It's going to rescue us from the predicament that we find ourselves in, the powers that we find ourselves under. It's a power of God for salvation. And it's not the power of us to save ourselves. We need somebody to come and rescue. We find ourselves in predicaments with other powers that wage war against us and the powers inside of us. And we need to be saved. And Paul is saying here, there's the power of God that can rescue, that can bring salvation. I've told some of you before about one of my most embarrassing moments, and it's when I took my two small children swimming in Lancaster swimming pool, public baths, and there we were, and they were probably about, 4 and 6 or something like that. And my eldest had just learned to swim and wanted to swim to the deep end. So I said, I'll go with him. So both of us are swimming towards the deep end. And I turned around to see my youngest, Jonathan. He was joining us as well. And as I turned around to say, are you okay? He kind of started sort of spluttering. So he grabbed onto one of my arms. With this, my older son, he saw that something was going on. He started to panic as well. So he grabbed hold of my other arm. So there I had one child on one arm, one child on the other arm. So I started to sink. As I started to sink, they thought they were going to sink too. So they started to climb on my head. And I started to kind of underwater. And before I knew, I could kind of vaguely hear these sirens going off. And and somebody kind of dived in. And this lifeguard came to pull me out and rescue me from drowning, from imminent death. And And as I kind of was pulled to the side and evacuate, and see everyone else, they're having their morning ruined, I knew what it was to be saved. As I saw the bubbles of my last breath rising to the surface, somebody came to my rescue. And that's what the gospel is. The gospel is somebody coming to our rescue. As we see the last breaths of our own efforts, our own attempts to sort our lives out, rising to the surface, someone dives into our world, into our mess, with a new kind of power. And it's a power to forgive, it's a power to heal, it's a power to remove shame and brokenness. There's an ultimate power. And Paul says here, it's the power of God. And we can know today the power of God. I used to be a physics teacher, and I'm not sure if you can remember any of your school physics, but do you know how power is defined? Power equals work done divided by time. Repeat after me. Power equals work done divided by time. All that means is that some effort, something happens, and the more powerful it is, the quicker time it's done in. So you can have something that kind of takes a long time to do, and actually it's not very powerful. But if you can see a lot happen in a short amount of time, that is great power. And here we have the gospel, and the gospel does great works in a short time. That's why it's ultimate power. God can bring healing in a moment as we say a prayer. Great change, great work in a short amount of time. We can see people who have sins forgiven. All your wrongdoing, everything. As soon as we say, Jesus, thank you for your death on the cross. Thank you died for me. Thank you that you took all the consequences of my actions and my thoughts. As soon as we say, Jesus, I'm sorry, and I thank you that you died. Miraculously, there's work done in a moment. Great power. When we see burdens that are lifted as a result of prayer, when we see shame removed, when we see being transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light, when we see the penalty and the power of sin totally removed in an instant, it's great power. Work done divided by time. And this evening, we're going to pray in a moment. And in an instant, God could do work in your life in a moment. It's great power. It's great power that can be at work. And that's what Paul says is in the gospel about Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection. Within that truth, there's great power for change. Now, I haven't got the chance this evening to explain because I need to stop in a moment to give us a chance to pray. But if you'd like to know a bit more about what that gospel is, and just that phrase, you don't really understand what I'm talking about, we have got something called the Alpha course that is running in a few weeks' time. And that gives you 10 weeks to investigate some of those real questions about what does it really mean to have faith, and what does it mean for Jesus' death and his resurrection that happened 2,000 years ago to change my life today. And there's some great big questions that some of you may have. And do look on the church website or at the leaflets at the back. Sign up for Alpha if that's who you are. But maybe for some of you this evening, you just want to know the power of God now. You want to know God doing a work in your life divided by time in a moment. The power of God that can forgive your shame, heal your body, transfer you from the kingdom of darkness with all the stuff that's associated with fear and dread and depression, and transfer you to the kingdom of light. And there's a power at work. Just before we do that, I think there's two battles. There's two battles that are at work. The two battles that in this verse in chapter 1, verse 16, there's two battles that we face. One is a battle over faith. The other is the battle of confidence. A battle of faith and a battle of confidence. If we're going to see this power of God not only changing our lives, but changing our broken and fragile world, there's two battles that as Christians we need to face. One is a battle of faith. Because it says here that the way that we see the power of God at work is for everyone who believes. The power of God to save is for everyone who believes. And I think we live in a cynical, unbelieving, distrusting society. And I think there's a battle around faith because we value intellect. We value consistent thinking and logic. But somehow faith seems a bit, believing unbelievable stuff. I'm not sure if I can do that. But for those who believe, for those who look at the evidence and say, on the balance of evidence, I'm going to trust. Faith is not just intellectual consent. And I think I'm sure there's people here, and your Christian faith is intellectual consent. You believe, you agree, you think, I'm a Christian, and you, if you are pushed, you say, yep, that's what I agree with. I give my consent to that. And, well, it says in the Bible that even the devil would agree that God exists, and so that's no big credit to you. But faith is something that's more than consent. It's more than just agreeing. Faith is to do with active trust. And active trust is something that if we're brought up to be cynical and hardened, if we're brought up to be doubters rather than believers, actually faith is really hard for some of us to exercise, to work. And it says here that it comes through faith. It's the righteous, they will be justified by faith, by their trust, by their belief. And there's a battle, I believe, around being people who believe rather than question. People who actively trust rather than persistently doubt. And I'm not just put it out there as we start this new term. How are you going to grow in faith? How are you going to be people who kind of believe and trust God more? John, when he talks about Jesus coming, says, yet to all who received him, to those who believed on his name, he gave the right to become children of God. There's something about believing and receiving. It's not just giving your intellectual consent to something, but your life acts as though I'm receiving something. I'm receiving what God promises, what he says. I'm taking his word to be true rather than my own thought patterns and the clever thoughts of the world in which we live. There's a battle around faith, and as well as praying for God's power, tonight I want to pray for the gift of faith, the faith for us to believe, to overcome our cynicism and our unbelief and to trust God. And just lastly, it says this. Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God for salvation. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And you know what? I think many of us are ashamed of the gospel. I mean, we're ashamed of mentioning Jesus. We're ashamed of, if this is the ultimate power, if the ultimate power to change is the good news that's within Jesus' death and resurrection, if that is the ultimate power that's going to resolve every issue in our broken world, why are we ashamed? Why are we embarrassed to talk about our faith? Why are we embarrassed to talk about Jesus? Jesus, God in our world. Jesus, the man who truly lived how life should be lived. And yet we might talk about our spiritual journey if we're brave enough, or about faith. But do we talk about Jesus? And we're not ashamed of the power of the gospel that's in his actions and what he did in his life. And we can feel a slight threat because we do live in a society where tolerance is king. Where maybe we feel, well, what right have we got with all these other religions for us to talk about Jesus? And to talk about hope and life in him. And we don't want to offend people, and we don't want to appear to be arrogant and conceited. So actually, we won't say anything. We'll just let our actions speak. And I love actions, but we need to speak because Paul says, let's not be ashamed of the gospel. Because it's the power. If we truly believed it was the power, if we truly believed that this is the way that every sin could be dealt with, every broken life could be put together, it's the real answer to our world. It's not to do with who's going to be the next mayor of Bristol, who's going to be the kind of how much money we're going to get, how we're going to sort out the euro crisis. That's not where the real power is. The real power is in the name of Jesus. And are we ashamed of the gospel? Do we have the proper understanding? This is hope. This is salvation. This is real life. Why would we not tell somebody who's drowning that there's a lifeguard to rescue them? Why would we not, when people's lives are in free fall and chaos, why wouldn't we tell them about the way out? And the enemy wants to keep us in fear of, well, what will people think? And I might lose my friends, and they'll think I'm a crackpot or a Bible basher, and we give in to shame. And Paul says here, don't be ashamed of the gospel. twice a year, I get together full-time church-based youth workers, and we think about the region of Bristol. And we think about how many young people within our region connect at all with church. And probably out of the 90,000 people, probably about 5,000 at some point connect with church. But that leaves 85,000 young people without a true, real understanding of who Jesus is. And I'll say to them again and again, it's great that you run your church-based youth work, but who's out there giving the good news of the gospel to people with a godless eternity, a godless, hopeless life? Who's out there? Let's not be ashamed. I've talked for too long, probably, because I want to give a chance for us to encounter something with the power of God now. Are you up for that? Great, there's a few of you, that's lovely. I mean, the deal is that we can be affected by all kinds of power, and tonight as we pray, tonight as we worship, my prayer has been that we would encounter an ultimate power, a power that's far, far greater than power that we feel we're under in our lives. And it's a power that can break your sinful desires. It's a power that can break any sense of shameful lust. It's a power that can break any kind of way of thinking that's a depraved mind. It's a power tonight that can change lives. Let's pray. Just as we take a chance to pray, I just want to ask the Holy Spirit to help us, because it's not a human power, it's a spiritual power. And Holy Spirit, I just want to invite you to be here. And I pray that people would be just relaxed and genuine and honest with you this evening. Thank you that you don't come to condemn and to crush us. You do come to rescue us. And Holy Spirit, I just want to pray that you be in this room now. We welcome you here. We welcome you, Holy Spirit, the Spirit that knows each heart, each mind, the Spirit who truly knows what power games are at work at the moment, and the Spirit who is a spirit of freedom. And I just want to pray now, Holy Spirit, you just be here tonight and rescuing people, setting them free from false powers. We welcome your power here, Lord. And I want to pray, Lord, that where people feel just self and addictions, and that somehow that those desires are too strong from at the moment, I want to pray for the power of the gospel to rescue, to break that power. Do it now, Lord, I pray. Where people know that relationships they're involved with have lust and sexual activities there, and it's not right, it's not appropriate, and it's self-seeking rather than lovingly giving, and it's not within the context of a marriage, it's in another context. And Lord, I want to pray now for where that power is quite a strong power. Will you bring release? Where our thought life, those unseen tracks that play in our minds, that propel us in a direction, I want to pray now for the power of God to break those, to bring freedom in Jesus' name.